A black little girl told a millionaire CEO to shut up in his own car. The truth will break you. Hit like button and comment down from which city you're watching. He thought he had everything. A private jet, a mansion on the hill, and a line of luxury cars parked neatly in his garage. To the world, he was untouchable, one of the most powerful CEOs alive. But what he didn't know was that, in just a few minutes, a little black girl was about to shatter his world. With just 2 words: shut up. It happened the moment he slid into the back seat of his sleek black car, expecting silence, respect, and control, like always. But instead, a young girl's voice cut through the air with a command he never thought he'd hear directed at him. Shocked, he froze. No one dared to speak to him that way. Not his employees, not his partners, not even his own family. Yet this girl did. What could possibly drive a child to speak so boldly, so fearlessly? What secret was buried deep enough that she couldn't stay silent, even in the presence of one of the most powerful men in the city? As the truth began to unfold, he realized this wasn't just a random encounter. It was fate. A collision between wealth and innocence, arrogance and honesty. And by the time the story was over, this millionaire CEO would never look at life the same way again, because sometimes the smallest voices carry the heaviest truths. He was a man the world envied. To the outside, Richard Halden looked untouchable, an empire builder, a man who had climbed from nothing to the highest towers of wealth. His face was on magazine covers, his words quoted in business schools, his suits tailored in Italy. He had a private jet, mansions across the country, a staff of assistants that bowed to every demand. Yet beneath all that polish, people whispered one truth. Richard was cold. He wasn't known for kindness or patience. To him, every second of life was a transaction, every person a tool to use or discard. Employees trembled when he entered the room. Partners rehearsed every word before speaking. Even his own family felt the weight of his presence. Richard commanded silence wherever he went, and silence was exactly what he expected that evening. The night had been long. He had just left a high-stakes meeting downtown, where fortunes shifted with a signature and competitors fell with a single ruthless decision. He was drained, but also proud, victorious. As he stepped out of the golden-lit tower into the cool city night, his black luxury car waited at the curb, sleek, polished, a machine as flawless as its owner. The chauffeur, an older man in a crisp cap, rushed to open the door. Richard gave only the smallest nod, acknowledgement without warmth, and slid into the leather back seat. And that's when his world cracked, because instead of the quiet hum of leather and silence, he heard a voice, a small, sharp, piercing voice. Shut up. Richard froze. His head jerked to the side. He wasn't alone. There, on the far side of the seat, sat a little black girl, no older than 7 or 8. Big, expressive eyes. Natural hair pulled into 2 small puffs. A dress that looked simple, a little worn but clean. She sat upright, her back stiff against the leather, hands clenched in her lap, and she had just told him to shut up. For a moment, Richard thought he had misheard. That maybe fatigue was playing tricks on him. But when he stared at her, the girl didn't look away. She held his gaze, her chin lifted with a quiet defiance no child should carry. Who are you? Richard demanded, his voice cold and clipped. The chauffeur glanced nervously in the mirror but said nothing. The girl didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't apologize. I said shut up, she repeated softly, and suddenly the air in the car shifted. The CEO, who had silenced boardrooms, who had crushed rivals with a word, found himself silenced by a child. Richard's mind raced. Who was she? How had she gotten into his car? Was this some kind of prank, a setup, a security failure? But none of those questions mattered as much as the weight of her voice, because she hadn't spoken with rudeness or spite. She had spoken with something heavier, something final, like a child who had seen too much. And in that moment, for the first time in years, Richard felt something he couldn't control, unease, because this wasn't just a girl in his car. This was the beginning of a truth that would tear his world apart. The car hummed quietly as it glided through the city, headlights carving a path through the dark streets. But inside, the silence was anything but quiet. It was electric, tense. A silence that crackled like lightning in the air. Richard Halden sat stiff in his seat, his jaw tightening, eyes locked on the little girl across from him. She was impossibly calm, too calm. He was used to fear, the kind that bent people into submission when they stood before him. This child. She sat in the back of his car, staring at him like she already knew how the story ended. Richard hated that. His voice came out sharp, dripping with authority. "Driver," I said, "pull over." The chauffeur's hands tightened around the wheel, but he didn't slow down. His voice was quiet, apologetic. "Sir, she asked me not to stop. Not yet." Richard blinked, his head snapping toward the mirror. She asked him? Since when did his driver take orders from a child? "This is absurd," Richard muttered, running a hand over his face. He turned back to the girl. "Listen to me. Whoever you are, this is over. Tell me where you live, and I'll have you taken home safely. You don't belong here." But the girl didn't shrink back. She didn't plead. She leaned forward, just slightly, her small hands folded over something in her lap. Her voice was steady. "I'm not leaving," she said. "Not until you hear the truth." Richard felt something hot rise in his chest. Frustration, disbelief. Who was this child to speak to him like this? "The truth?" he hissed. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes." That single word, delivered without hesitation, landed like a stone in the still air. Her eyes, dark and unwavering, didn't move from his. "You're the man who thinks silence is respect. The man who tells people to be quiet so you don't have to face what you've done." Richard's breath caught. The words sliced deeper than they should have. He masked it with a scoff, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. "Enough," he muttered. "This little stunt ends now." "Don't," she said sharply. It wasn't a plea. It was a command. Richard froze, his thumb hovering over the screen. His chest rose and fell as he stared at her. No one, not in years, had dared to stop him with a single word. And yet, he obeyed. He slipped the phone back into his pocket, his teeth grinding. "You're a very brave little girl," he said slowly, his voice low and dangerous. "But bravery can be dangerous. Tell me, what do you want from me?" The girl's fingers tightened around the object in her lap. A flicker of fear flashed across her face, but it was quickly swallowed by resolve. She lifted her chin. "I don't want your money. I don't want your cars or your houses or anything you can buy." She looked down, then back up at him, her voice breaking slightly. "I just want you to remember." The words hit him harder than he expected. Remember. His mind scrambled, trying to place her. He had shaken thousands of hands, crushed hundreds, of rivals, broken more promises than he could count. What could a child possibly know about his past? "Remember what?" he demanded. The girl slowly unfolded her hand. In her palm lay an old, weathered photograph, its corners bent. The image, slightly faded, she held it out just enough for him to see. Richard's eyes locked onto it, and for the first time that night his breath faltered. It was a picture of a woman he knew. The air thickened around him. He reached out instinctively, but the girl pulled it back, holding it protectively against her chest. "You don't get to take it," she said. "Not yet." His heart pounded. He swallowed hard, his carefully built walls beginning to crack. Where did you get that?" The girl's eyes filled with something he couldn't quite name. Sadness, anger, longing. "From the person you walked away from," she whispered. Richard's stomach churned. He leaned back, his face pale. "This is nonsense," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The girl leaned forward now, her small frame radiating a strength that shouldn't have been possible. "You spent your whole life building towers so tall you couldn't hear the people you left at the bottom. But I'm here tonight to make sure you finally listen." Richard's mask of arrogance cracked. His voice trembled as he tried to push back. "Listen to what? I've given the world jobs, opportunities, a future." "Not to her," the girl interrupted, her voice sharp. Not to me. Silence. The car's engine purred softly, the city's neon lights flashing past tinted windows. But inside, Richard felt trapped, as if the leather walls of his own car were closing in. He looked at the girl again, his voice breaking. Who are you? Her eyes shimmered as she clutched the photograph tighter. I'm the part of your past you can't erase, and tonight, I'm the part of your future that won't let you run anymore. Richard's chest constricted. For the first time in decades, he felt powerless. Not to markets, not to rivals, but to a child's truth, and deep inside, he knew this was the turning point. The empire he had built on silence was about to collapse under the weight of her words. The photograph trembled in Richard's hands. His polished fingers, hands that had signed billion-dollar deals and toppled companies with a flick of a pen, now clutched a faded scrap of paper like it was the most dangerous thing in the world. It was her, the woman, the one memory he had buried deeper than all the rest. She stared back at him from the photograph, smiling, hopeful, holding a tiny baby in her arms. A baby he had chosen not to know. Richard's lips parted, but no words came out. His throat tightened as the walls of the car seemed to shrink. For the first time in decades, the man who prided himself on control had no answers. No clever excuses. Just silence. Across from him, the girl watched. She didn't smirk. She didn't gloat. She sat quietly, her small chest rising and falling, eyes glistening but unbroken. Finally, Richard's voice scraped out, rough and brittle. Your mother. The girl nodded once. She's gone. The words landed like a knife. His stomach dropped. He turned the photo over as if the back might hold an explanation, but it was blank. Just paper. Just memory. His chest heaved. Why come to me now? His voice cracked. After all these years? Because she never stopped waiting, the girl said. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of a verdict. She believed one day you'd turn around, that you'd remember she existed, that we existed. Richard's throat burned. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. Her eyes, her mother's eyes, locked him in place. The chauffeur drove on, silent as stone, the city lights flashing like ghosts across the tinted glass. Richard pressed a trembling hand against his forehead. I thought I was protecting her, he whispered. I thought if I walked away, she'd be free of my mistakes, my enemies, my world. The girl shook her head slowly. No, you didn't protect her. You abandoned her. And you abandoned me. The words sliced deeper than any boardroom betrayal ever had. Richard leaned back, staring up at the car's ceiling. His breath came in ragged pulls. For so long he had believed success justified everything. That sacrifices were necessary. That the past was just collateral damage. But sitting across from him was living proof that the past doesn't disappear. It grows. It waits. It knocks on your door, or in his case climbs into your car, demanding to be heard. He closed his eyes, tears welling despite himself. His voice shook. What do you want from me? The girl didn't hesitate. I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I just want you to feel what she felt, to carry it the way we carried it, to understand what it means to be left behind. Her voice cracked, but her gaze never wavered. And maybe, to change. The word echoed in the car. Change. Richard had spent his life changing everything but himself. Companies, cities, fortunes. Yet here was a child asking for the one thing he had never given. He swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. I don't know if I can. The girl leaned forward. Then at least try. Silence fell again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was fragile, tentative, like a bridge just beginning to form across an impossible divide. Richard looked down at the photograph again. The woman's smile burned into him. Regret hollowed his chest. He thought of the nights she must have spent alone, the struggles she faced, the little girl growing up without a father while he counted profits. For the first time, the skyscrapers, and cars and private jets felt like chains instead of trophies. The car rolled to a stop outside his mansion. Gates of iron loomed tall, guards standing at attention, his fortress of wealth. But tonight, it felt like a prison. He looked at the girl, her small frame dwarfed by the leather seat, but her presence larger than life. He cleared his throat. "Come inside, please." She hesitated. For a long moment, Richard thought she would refuse. But finally she nodded once, clutching the photograph as they stepped out together. Inside the mansion, marble floors gleamed under golden chandeliers. But instead of pride, Richard felt shame as her small shoes echoed in the vast emptiness. Every painting, every statue, every polished surface screamed of a life lived for self. The girl stopped in the center of the grand hall, her voice quiet. All of this, and you couldn't give her what she wanted most. You. Richard's chest ached. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time, tears spilled freely, staining the suit that had always been his armor. He looked up, broken. "What do I do now?" The girl studied him. Her voice softened. "You start by listening, by seeing the people you've ignored, by remembering her every single day, and maybe by being there for me if you mean it." Her words pierced deeper than any investor's demand, any rival's challenge. They weren't about power or deals. They were about humanity. Richard nodded slowly, his voice choked. "I'll try. God help me, I'll try." Weeks turned into months. For the first time in his career, Richard skipped board meetings. He closed deals remotely. His colleagues whispered about his distraction, his softening. But Richard didn't care. He spent mornings walking the girl to school, evenings listening to her stories, weekends learning the small details of her life, the details he had missed for years. He was clumsy at first, awkward. He didn't know how to braid hair or pack lunches or help with homework. But he learned, slowly, imperfectly. And every time he stumbled, the photograph reminded him, keep trying. His empire didn't crumble, but it no longer consumed him. For the first time, he understood. True legacy isn't built in towers of glass and steel. It's built in the hearts of those who remember you when the towers fall. Years later, when Richard's name appeared in magazines again, the headlines didn't praise his wealth. They spoke of the CEO who poured millions into scholarships for children from broken homes, who funded shelters for single mothers, who quietly sat in the back of community halls, listening more than speaking. At his side, often, was a young girl, no longer small, no longer trembling but strong, her mother's fire in her eyes, and when people asked Richard why he changed, his answer was always the same. Because one night, a little girl told me to shut up. And for the first time, I listened.